I feel that it's really important to have a conversation with people through my art if they want, and otherwise they can look at the absolute beauty of West Virginia that I portray in my work. Many times I will create something about the fracking or the gas lines and the pipes, and it might be a very straight electrical line that has been cut through the woods. So there's the graphic line and yet that beautiful fall picture of rolling mountains and vista. So it's the tourism, but it's man's impact on raping the earth and taking our natural resources away. And I want to do it subtly, but I also want people to have a conversation. To be able to be a Girl Scout for me, as you can see in the background, these are my badges. I learned a little of everything. I do know that Girl Scouting has probably developed all of my skills. Through scouting and growing up in the 60s into the 70s, a social awareness of climate change, recycling, helping individuals and helping others. Those are topics that I grew up with. So these are not new topics. It's really exciting when I looked back at when did I start creating. My mother was a creative person. We lived on 120 acres of land in the northwestern part of New Jersey with her parents down the lane. So it's multi-generational experience that my brother and I had. We would explore our woods. And I remember every Christmas, my mom would come up with a different craft that we would do together. So there's the string art and macrame and a little bit of pin loom weaving for the coasters and things like that. There always was something going on that we were exploring. My mom made all of our clothes, and eventually she taught me how to sew. So I've created all the time. I love working with my hands. My grandmother taught me knitting and crocheting, and that's creating. I tried fine art. I tried oil painting lessons. That painting is in the attic, never finished. And I tried watercolor. Both of those mediums need more time to understand how to manipulate the materials and the techniques. So photography was my medium in art major in college. I did have to do a life drawing class, which was limited in understanding, but I passed. All of those different craft projects that we learned, they were skills that we were able to look around and find string and do it again. My father was in the Navy, so he taught me some of the knots that we were using in macrame. I didn't realize that it was social art, but I was living it. Being able to have some experience in history and an overview, I realized the ERA and the graphics of some of these protests or awareness situations have kind of lodged themselves into my brain for inspirations. My art doesn't scream out about issues as other artists might, but there are times when, especially when I really feel that it's important that the message be gotten across bluntly, that I will use letters or words. We had friends whose brothers went to Vietnam. There was an awareness. Certainly when I was in school in Boston in 75, I knew when the church bells rang and that part of it. The ERA issue, that came to light, of course, in the 70s and something that I understood. It was a time period when women, young ladies were allowed to be participating in sports with the men. And that was a very important issue. I remember that I was on the track team, and it was the first year that women and men were able to be on that track team because we didn't have a large enough team to be able to have it in both of the sexes. So I thought that was important. I know that my grandmother worked with my grandfather. My mother met my father. She raised us and then went back to work. So I have an experience of women being entrepreneurs. It's the independence and the ability of women or people in general to be equal and to be recognized, to be able to do what they want, and also the environment. Those two issues are extremely important to me. The human impact on the environment. When I finally found a medium to be able to express myself other than photography, which was rug hooking, I was exposed to a variety of different people, and I thought, oh my gosh, I have to focus and build a body of work. What is my message going to be? It was interesting to see Linda Ray Coughlin's work and focus on feminism. Her messages are always quite blatant or visual, and I was uncomfortable with going in that direction, even though feminism was important to me. So I worked around for about 20 years in pattern making and my historical background in Pennsylvania German designs, and that was comfortable. But now being here in West Virginia, I created a sketch every day, a 5-inch sketch that I did not limit myself that it had to be hooked. I didn't care what technique I was going to use, but each sketch was going to be a standalone item eventually after that year. So there's at least 365 squares. And as I did that, I realized I was able to explore painting a background of the linen and just hooking one line, or the best part that I really found out again was that I like to embroider. So even just long stitch and short stitch and straight outline, I'm able to do a lettering. It works quicker than rug hooking. I'm able to explore a whole different type of background fabric. I can go into the fabric stores and look at the cottons and the batiks and all the wonderful patterns and designs and buy some. So I have combined them. It's a passion of mine. I realized back in the turn of the 21st century, there was an exhibit, and the theme from the American Folk Art Museum was Icons of America. And I decided our money was an icon and our coins. So I took the Liberty $50 and started working on it. And I evolved. That piece didn't get finished for the deadline because I really didn't want to just hook the piece. I ended up stuffing and manipulating some fabric that I had worked on so that the dress was dimensional, just like the coin would be. And then there's embroidery in it. And I'm very happy with that piece. It has received some interesting awards and good notoriety. Everything that I learned along the way has come back together and combined them. And I continue to explore. I think the exploration is in dimension, actual dimension, rather than portraying it, as you can do in rug hooking or any 2D medium, is work with values and contrast and shapes and scales, and you can accomplish a visual depth. But if you actually paint the background and then collage a piece and then hook some loops really high, you've created 3D. One of the other things that I've found interesting in studying historical art is that there are a variety of artists who chose women's craft to be a technique that they wanted to use in their fine art pieces that they were submitting in exhibitions. And two people that I really appreciated understanding were Blanche Lazelle from West Virginia, who's known as a modernist printmaker. She painted on china, and she also used rug hooking to explore the interpretation of her prints into patterns. She specifically explored women's work to show to the wide audience of fine artists that it's a skill and a craft, but isn't necessarily only a decorative art. And the other artist was Marguerite Zorak, who just worked with huge tapestries of embroidery work and also rug hooking. I respect the women who were taking something familiar in a technique and introducing it to an audience. It's interesting to look back on your own life and pull things together or realize why you've gravitated back to clothing, as I did. In my senior year in high school, in those early 1970s, I embroidered a pair of jeans. Thankfully, my parents have never moved from the home that I was born in, so the attic had that pair of jeans. In 2016, I decided I needed to decorate another pair of jeans. And that pair of jeans has motifs of women with posters about voting and global issues, our local issues. It's cathartic to be able to work with your hands and express your own emotions as you're working and stitching. So I have a shirt jacket that on the back has women's names throughout, and it acknowledging the issues of the 2016s and 2017s and 2018s and 2019s. It's interesting when I wear the clothing, the people's reactions. I'm careful where I wear it. I don't like to scream out, but I do want to have conversations. So I'm comfortable with what I've done, but there are areas where I would rather not have negative conversations. I want positive ones and open growth. I believe that our art throughout history is a way that people are able to speak for a longer period of time. So if you look at the work in Pompeii that we admire, it's frescoes, and it's actually art about daily living. That's what I think is social art. I think it's the opportunity to memorialize what's happening in society at the particular period of time. And oftentimes, except for maybe posterization, it's not going to have an immediate impact, but it will historically, and it gradually helps inform and educate people throughout the future generations. ERA, yes, in 1973 is just as important as it is in 2019, but it's also how did people act and react by seeing that message. Just being able to have a group of people see a visual message and understand others are thinking that way, climate change and such. One of my mother's favorite sayings was, "You never know who's watching you." And you don't. You can be making a statement either verbally or with your artwork. You don't know how it's going to affect someone else or when.